Hey everyone, Andrew here, bringing you another video. Today we're going to be doing a much requested video, a video that I think everyone's been wanting, and that would be a brand new Batman timeline video. With a bit of an asterisk, right? For those of you that follow me on Patreon, you already got a brand new Batman timeline video with, well, all the meat and the fixings, right? It laid out flat the whole history of Batman. And this video is going to talk about the timeline of Batman, but it is not going to be a chronological order of stories per se, right? I will be talking about where certain stories take place, but this timeline video is actually going to be focusing on, well, answering a couple questions. See, as a big comic book fan of Batman like me, I care a lot about the stuff that really doesn't matter in the long term of things. I care about how old Bruce Wayne is. I care about knowing how long Dick Grayson was Robin. I care about knowing when Damian Wayne was conceived and how old he really is. I care about what costumes Batman wore in his early career, seeing that we now have Rebirth and New 52. I care about all those smaller minutiae that really doesn't paint towards the overall narrative of whether a comic is good or not. Right? I can pick up, say, let's take a Batman story. Let's take up Batman Nightfall, one of my favorite Batman stories. And I can sit down and enjoy it for what it is. But really, how much of Nightfall is still considered canon? How much of Nightfall has been changed? Really, where does it take place in the timeline now? It's frustrating for me sometimes. And I thought to myself, well, Andrew, maybe you should take some time and really map this shit out. So I decided to. And I sat down for a couple hours and I did a Excel spreadsheet that basically maps out how many years Batman has been Batman, his ages for him and his sidekicks in his rogue gallery. Well, not really so much his rogue gallery, but his sidekicks and his allies. What costumes he wore, and what major stories took place during that time. So, basically, in this timeline video, we're going to be talking about that. I'm going to give you a year-by-year play of how many years Bruce Wayne has been Batman. In addition to that, I'm going to talk about how old him and his allies were during those years. I'm going to talk about what costumes he wore, or suits he wore during that time, and why he wore them. And I will also talk about what major stories took place during those years, or where you can couple those stories together. Now, if you do not mind, I am going to be referencing my phone a bit, because I'm using a separate computer than what the Excel document was on. So, if I open this bad boy up, you can see the whole documents right there. Actually, you can't see because of the blurring, the light, and all that jazz. But your boy can check it out right here. So, with that said, we're going to talk about this Batman timeline video, and we're going to really dig into the nitty-gritty of what we're looking for when it comes down to mapping Batman's history. First and foremost, let's talk about some important things to get out of the way. First and foremost, this is going to be basically my headcanon. Because DC is so malleable and changes so much, especially with what's going on with Doomsday Clock and various other stories going on in the DC universe right now, things are always subject to change. Nothing's set in stone. This gives a tremendous amount of freedom for the writers, but again, it also gives a tremendous amount of gray area in Batman's history. So, what I want to do right now is just convey to you guys, this is me mapping out in my head, trying to make sense of the chaos that is Batman's history. But I will be using some solid, set-in-stone facts that we know for sure happened, or are rules that are put in place by DC Comics that are true. I will also talk about the things that were put in place by DC Comics that they 100% contradict with themselves, and then I'm going to have to pick which of the two works best for the timeline. So let's get a couple things out of the way first. Let's set some stuff in stone. So what are we working with? We're working with a continuity that is heavily influenced by basically 3 to 4 events. We do have the pre-Crisis, post-Crisis DC Universe, which was effectively changed by the New 52. As you know, the New 52 condensed all the DC histories down to a 5-year period, 5 to 6 years by the end of the New 52, and edited a lot of the characters' histories. Now, that's okay, because Batman's history wasn't edited that much. There were a few changes here and there, but for the most part, Batman's history was pretty unscathed in comparison to other people. There were a lot of contradictions in this, like how does Batman have a 12-year-old son if he's only been around for 5 years? Well, I mean, DC kind of answered this with Robin being genetically aged and all that junk, but I'll get into that later when I talk to Damian. Then we have Rebirth, and Rebirth basically starts bringing in a lot of the old concepts to the New 52 canon. But it has not changed continuity completely. It's only bringing in the old canon to the new canon. But it's actually with Superman that greatly affects Batman's continuity. Yeah, you're wondering, why does the boy in blue affect Batman's continuity? Well, in Superman Rebirth, there were essentially two Supermen. There was the post-Crisis Superman and the New 52 Superman. One Superman had a wife and a family with Lois Lane and his son John Kent, and they lived outside of canon. They were created because of the Convergence series. And then there was the New 52 Superman and Lois Lane, who both recently had died. There was a storyline called Superman Rebirth, where we find out that two Supermen are actually one and the same, just separated when New 52 happened. The two merge back together, and by doing so, effectively rewrite history for the whole DC universe. And basically does a couple changes. Mainly adds several years on to every single superhero's canon. So now we're no longer playing with just a 5 to 6 year span for Batman's career. Because of what happened in Superman and him effectively rewriting the universe, it gives us a lot more time to work with. So then we have to ask ourselves a couple questions. How long has Batman been Batman? Well, I think the biggest determinant for this is we have to go by Damian Wayne, Batman's son. So there's two major superhero characters, and I say major, so, members of the Justice League that have children. That's Superman and Batman. Superman's son, John, as of right now, is around the age of 10. Although, in the current storyline, he's been aged up to 15 years old. But, for the most part, he's been around for 10 years. And John had shown up around year 3 of Superman's career. I'm just spitballing, right? So, we know that Superman has been around for well over 10 years. And Batman showed up either before, at the same time, or after Superman, depending on what canon you're going by. If you're going by post-Crisis, he shows up afterwards. If you're going by post-New 52, he shows up beforehand. And really, Rebirth says that they came out roughly the same time. I play by this act that they come out at the same time. So, if that's the case, we know Batman's been around more than 10 years. Now, why is this important for Damian? Well, at the start of Rebirth, Damian joins the Teen Titans, or he creates his version of the Teen Titans. And in order to be a Teen Titan, you have to be a teenager. So we get to see basically a panel showing that Damian Wayne is now 13 years old. So we know that Damian is at least 13. And I'm going to rule out all that genetic manipulation to make him grow faster, because although he can have the body of a 13-year-old and be 5 years old, he's still 5 years old. Or 10 years old, or whatever. In the comic, it explicitly states that Damian Wayne is 13. So that means Batman has to be around for at least 13 years. So the big question is when was Damian Wayne conceived? Yeah. Are you guys still with me? Don't worry, I'm going to go year by year and really give you guys a breakdown at the end, so just stay with me. So, in saying that, we have a couple other things to lay down that are solidified facts. Fact number 1. This is set by Batman Year 1 and 0 Year that Bruce Wayne starts his career at the age of 25. So we know for a fact that Bruce is 25 when he starts. That's a great gauge to figure out exactly where Bruce is at the end of the current timeline. We also know for a fact that Selina is at least either a year younger or the same age as Bruce. For the sake of this video, I'm doing them the same age, right? We also know that Dick Grayson is 2 years younger than Barbara Gordon. This is stated throughout many of the DC properties, and it's kind of stated in DC's 0 Year / the origin stories for the New 52 counterparts, right? Barbara's kind of getting ready to go to college, where Dick is just in high school. In addition to that, we know based off the current continuity, unless something was stated otherwise that I don't know about, Tim Drake is going into Ivy College, which means he's roughly around the age of 17 to 18 years old because he's getting ready to go to university, which in the Americas, or at least in the U.S., usually is around the age of 18. However, we have to also take into account that Tim Drake is a genius and that he could have gotten into school faster, but I don't have any evidence saying that. Maybe they're out there, but for the sake of this video, let's just go by that, right? So we have some solidified facts, right? Batman starts his career at age 25. Dick Grayson's 2 years younger than Barbara Gordon. Tim Drake is going into university right now. Damian Wayne's currently 13 years old. So that's a lot of stuff to work with. So where do we go from here? Well, we're going to go exactly where we should go, and that's at the start, with year one of Batman's career. So the first year of Batman's career is arguably one of the easiest of them to map out. Long and short of it is there's 2 origin stories for Batman. And I said in my previous timeline video that was Patreon only that, generally speaking with continuity, you just pick the story that is the most recent or up to date and use that as a reference of what is canon, unless otherwise stated. Well, since that video, otherwise was stated. Now the 2 origins that Batman have is Batman Year 1 and Batman 0 Year. Year 1 was written in the 1980s by the famed Frank Miller, and it serves as a good origin story, actually arguably the best origin story for Batman. Batman 0 Year was written during the New 52 era by Scott Snyder, also an excellent writer. And this kind of expands off a lot of ideas from Year 1, but really kind of etches its own path. Now, do the 2 contradict with each other? Kind of, but no. Here's the thing that makes things kind of complicated for basically Batman's origins. And I said Year 1 was the easiest of the years. Basically, Scott Snyder said that both Year 1 and 0 Year take place at the same time. Because of what's happening in Doomsday Clock, as well as other various stories in DC right now, and this quote was from a couple months ago, basically both stories happen. So the question is really, what story takes place when? So it's time to use that headcanon. Because in the current Batman run, Tom King has been referencing a lot of Year 1 and not a lot of 0 Year. So, for the sake of this video, I'm going to go base that Year 1 is the more definitive origin for Batman. And honestly, I think it's the better of the stories. There are things about 0 Year that's better, but Year 1 is arguably, without a doubt, the better of the 2 stories. So, Year 1, Bruce Wayne returns back from training at the age of 25. The events of Year 1 happens. He meets up and encounters Catwoman, Selina Kyle, who is also at age 25 at this time. Now, the events of Year 1 take place, and then at the end of Year 1, a good chunk of the events of 0 Year take place. Now, maybe a few details were changed because of Rebirth, but some stuff like his interaction with the Red Hood gang or Dr. Death, or even his interactions with Riddler can still be considered canon. But for my headcanon, Year 1 takes place first, and then 0 Year takes place afterwards. So, yeah. Where does that lie with the Batman costumes? Well, there's 3 contending costumes that go on right now during Year 1 of Batman's career. First is the Year 1 costume, which is the most basic Batman costume out there. Batman dons this costume first, and it's more or less like a ninja's costume, right? It has the theatrics of the bat cowl and the cape, it has the underwear and the very basic bat belt, and it's light armored. It's meant more for stealth, mobility, than any other tactical need. And he utilizes this mostly throughout all of the Year 1 story. At the end of the Year 1 story, we lead into 0 Year, where he deals with the Red Hood gang. Because this gang is so dangerous, he has to update his costume and his equipment. And using Wayne Tech, he does so, and thus the Zero-Year costume is created. Zero-Year costume provides more of a tactical feel to it. It's more heavily armored. It can take basically shotgun hits, some knife attacks, anything except for a straight shot from a pistol. It also provides Batman with various different equipment that he didn't have beforehand. Most notably is the grapple gun, which basically lets him zipline. This Zero-Year costume exists just for Zero-Year. Because at the end of Zero-Year, at the end of the year 1, Bruce Wayne adopts the New 52 costume, version 1, which is the Jim Lee version of the New 52 costume. This is evident because it shows up in later stories, both in Rebirth and New 52, such as War of the Joker and Riddles, as well as Justice League Origins, which I'll get into a bit later. But we actually see him don this suit at the end of Zero-Year. And the New 52 suit is blending the best of both worlds from the Zero-Year and the Year 1 suit. It has the theatrics, the stealthy aspect, the creature of the night of the Year 1 costume, and it's a little bit more streamlined, while also having the tactical aspect of basically the Zero-Year costume, having more of a body armor to it. Now, I reference saying it's the version 1, the Jim Lee costume, because it's basically that. When Jim Lee had drawn the New 52 costume, he draws it a little bit more like armor, whereas, say, Greg Capullo, who draws it more like, well, clothing. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more when we come to the version 2 of the costume. Catwoman, on the other hand, has just her Year 1 costume, which is basically the basic cat costume. Very low-tech, very, very kind of homemade. But yeah, that is Year 1 of Batman's career. Now, let's jump into Year 2. Year 2. One of the more interesting years of Batman's career, because a lot of stuff happens in this. First and foremost, let's talk about the ages. There's 3 major characters that come into play. Bruce, Selina, and Dick. Bruce and Selina are now 26 years old, and Dick Grayson gets introduced as the first Robin at age 13. So keep that in mind. Unfortunately, it will pain me, and it will hurt me in saying that one of the most famous and Batman stories kind of don't fit in Year 2 anymore. And that is The Long Halloween. Long Halloween is arguably one of the greatest Batman stories out there, done by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale, and it's a really great origin story for Two-Face, as well as kind of a transition from the mob bosses of the old into the more eccentric, colorful supervillains of Batman's Rogue Gallery. So what does this say about Year 2? Well, we know for a fact that there's one story that's 100% canon and takes place in Year 2, and that would be the War of the Joker and Riddles, or at least the flashback of the War of the Joker and Riddles. This is basically a massive battle and war that takes place between the Joker and the Riddler, which I'm not going to go into the details of the story, but it involves a lot of people. It involves Batman, it involves Catwoman, it involves a huge slew of each Rogue Gallery. All the way down to Deathstroke, who jumps in here and has his cake and eat it too. Now, in theory, if you want to, you can condense down the Long Halloween down to a couple months and have it started at the tail end of Year 1, going into Year 2, and you can kind of make it fit. So I'll allow that, right? Because in my head, I think the Long Halloween origin for Two-Face is better than the Batman Robin New 52 origin that was given. Plus, there's a lot of indications that kind of is the origin now. But again, continuity. But we know for a fact that War of the Joker and Riddles take place. Now, before War of the Joker and Riddles, we also have Justice League Origin take place. Now, a couple things to talk about Justice League Origin and the reason why I'm referencing it. A couple things. One is, we know it takes place before War of the Jokes and Riddles because Batman references the fact that he is a Justice Leaguer by this time. The League had already formed. Number two, we know this is the origin of the Justice League, or at least I know it's the origin of the Justice League. There are two things that make me believe that this is 100% the origin. Number one is Cyborg references Justice League Origins a lot during Rebirth, to the point that he actually got into a fight with Simon Baz about it. This was during the Christopher Priest run. Second thing is when I met Jeff Johns at New York Comic Con, and again, you're just going to have to take me to my word. One of the things I asked him is, hey, is Justice League Origins still the origin of the Justice League? He said, yes, it is. So all the members, including Cyborg, is that Justice League? He's like, yes, it is. Including the costumes that they wore. He goes, yes, they are. Right? So again, this is a evidence to the New 52 Batman costume. Now, after the War of the Joker and Riddles, this is when Dick Grayson gets introduced. And you can go by many different Dick Grayson's origins. They're all relatively the same. They involve Tony Zuko. They involve the circus. Now, exactly how he gets his costume, do you want to go by the Lady Shiva interpretation or not? From New 52, it's up to you. However, right, Dick Grayson, fun fact for you, well, there are many references to him having a slew of Nightwing costumes. He actually only has had reference to one Robin costume in Rebirth and in New 52, and that was the New 52 Robin costume. The only reference I can make to his older costume, you know, the old school Pixie Boot costume, is Tim Drake wearing it in some weird conversation video that he's had with Damian Wayne on the Deathstroke comic. But other than that, every time they reference Dick as Robin, he's wearing the New 52 costume. And then towards the tail end, we get a lot of the Legend of the Dark Knight stories. So for year 2, if you're making your year 2 timeline, right, you have War of the Joker and Riddles, you have Justice League Origin, and as well as you have lots of the Legend of the Dark Knight and Batman Confidential stories. So that is year 2. As opposed to the costumes, right? Batman stays with his New 52 costume, and in addition to that, Catwoman updates her costume to the pink and black costume that she, you see her wear during the 90s. So with that said, let's move on. Okay. I'm going to be sticking year 3, 4, and 5 kind of together because although a lot of stuff happens, a lot of stuff doesn't happen. Because year 3, 4, and 5 are basically Silver and Bronze Age stories for Batman and Robin. So just respectively, I'm going to go through the ages and kind of give you a quick bullet point for what happens, right? So you have year 3, which Bruce is now 27, Selina is now 27, Dick is now 14, and Barbara Gordon gets introduced as Batgirl at age 16. And the Batgirl origin costume, all the references we have in New 52 and in Rebirth shows her origin costume being the 0-year costume, or something similar to her current costume, right? It's a domino mask, blue cape, yellow bat symbol, so on and so forth. And yeah, during year 3, it's pretty much the Silver Age stories. But this is also important because this is where Damian Wayne gets conceived. Because Damian Wayne gets conceived during the Tales of the Demon story arc, where Bruce meets Ra's al Ghul and eventually, gets it on with Talia al Ghul. And to make things work, you kind of have to fit it in year 3, or at least the end of year 2 into year 3. Somewhere on that, because it gives enough chance for Damian Wayne to be 13 at the current year, right? Year 4, Bruce is 28, Selina is 28, Dick is 15, Babs is 17, and the major event that happens in this is Dick forms the first Teen Titans of this continuity, which consists of him, Donna Troy, Wally West Kid Flash, Garth for Tempest, Arsenal for Roy Harper, as well as Hawk and Dove, and Lilith, and also Narc. I think I got everyone in there. But mainly it's the original 4. So he forms the Teen Titans, and this is where we kind of shift into the Bronze Age, right? Where we shift into kind of the stories that were set during the 1970s. And then we go into year 5, which Bruce is now 29, Selina is now 29, Dick is 16, Babs is now 18, and again, more Silver Age, Bronze Age stories. during this whole entire time, the costumes stay relatively the same, with the exception of Bruce and Selina hop back and forth between some costumes. Let's talk about those costumes, shall we? Now, eventually, we see a lot of references to Bruce wearing different costumes at different times. And this isn't just New 52 stuff, this is Rebirth. We see a lot of references that he's worn the New 52 costume up to at least when, Jason Todd dies. But we also see references him to wearing the classic detective costume, as well as wearing what I call the Hush costume. And basically the classic detective costume, right, is, and I'll show a reference to all these costumes at the end, but here she is. Good old classic detective Batman. Is the yellow emblem with the blue cape and the capsules for the belt. And the benefit of the classic detective costume, and you're wondering why would he go back to the blue underwear and kind of a basic costume, is that eventually Batman's technology gets a lot better in that he kind of streamlines his suit to be less armor on the outside and more underneath the actual costume itself. And he tries to kind of streamline the speed and stealth of the costumes too. Now, the classic detective is not that stealthy, but what it really does is exactly that. It is a detective suit. It's minimalistic. Its tools are geared towards solving cases rather than fighting enemies, and it's got a more of a blue approach with the bat symbol because of the lore mythos of Batman, right? The blue really doesn't play into anything, but the bat symbol itself is him, in the most recent action Detective Comics 1000 it's the gun of Joe Chill, but really it's been part of the lore mythos. That's the strongest part of his armor, right? So if he's making his armor underneath the costume in a lot more streamlined, it makes sense that he would want the biggest target to be the strongest focal point of the armor. We also see him don what I would call the Hush costume, and I could pull out the Hush figure here, but I think a better representation would be here, which is basically the New 52 costume with underwear and the armor on the inside. The black bat symbol, the pouches, as well as, more of the gray streamline with the armor underneath. Now, this costume is going to be another improvement on the designs and concepts of the New 52 and the classic detective, marrying the two together. And that's the costume he's currently wearing. Which will eventually lead us into other costumes and going back to the New 52 costume version 2. Selina also switches through several costumes during this time. Any costume Selina has ever worn gets worn during this time. Dick Grayson, however, sticks with his traditional Robin costume, and then Babs is still with her regular good old-fashioned Silver Age-ish / New 52 costume. So, with that said, let's move on to the next year. So I'm going to couple year 6 and year 7 together because there's a couple events that happen, but we can kind of streamline those 2 years together. Year 6, ages-wise, you have Bruce at 30, Selina at 30, Dick at 17, Babs at 19. And the only thing that majorly happens in this is technically Batman forms the Outsiders, or the first version of the Outsiders. Now, this is kind of debated, but it does make reference in DC Metal, or I think it's Dark Days Metal, one of the Scott Snyder tie-in comics, where Hal Jordan stumbles upon the fact that Batman's had a covert team. It makes sense, right? But who knows what happens in the future, because I think the new Outsider comic that's coming out is technically the first team of the Outsiders. I don't know. But yeah, that's the only major event. But year 7 is where things get interesting. Bruce is 31, Selina is 31, Dick is 18, Babs is 20, Jason is 16. Dick becomes Nightwing, and Jason Todd starts his training to become Robin. He does not become Robin quite yet, but he starts his training. We know that Jason trains to be Robin for at least 6 months. This is referenced in various different materials. And Dick's origin as Nightwing with his costumes, right? He wears every Nightwing costume, so one can assume it's the disco Nightwing costume, which we see reference to in the current Nightwing comic. And eventually he'll transition over to the Nightfall costume, and then finally into his more streamlined blue emblem, majority black jumpsuit Nightwing costume. And as for Jason Todd, when he does become Robin, the only reference we have of Robin, the continuity for him, is he wears the New 52 Robin costume. Bruce also starts wearing Streamline a little bit more of the New 52 costume during this time. We see very little references to Catwoman or Barbara Gordon at this time, and it's going to be interesting because when we move on, and might as well jump into year 8, with Bruce being 32, Selina 32, Dick 19, Baz 21, and Jason 17. Jason is Robin, but the killing joke happens, which paralyzes Barbara Gordon, which leads into death of the family. So Jason Todd is then killed. So here's a fun fact: Jason Todd dies, but he doesn't stay dead for long. All subsequent information of Jason Todd's resurrection, of him being thrown in the Lazarus pit and coming out, usually takes place months after he is dead, right? I think before New 52, the concept is he was dead for years and then got resurrected because of the Superboy punch. But since then, Rebirth in New 52 says that he was basically dead for a couple months. Talia dug out the grave, threw him in the Lazarus pit, and he came back. So yeah, that's that happens, right? Moving on. So we were on year 8, now year 9. Tim is 30. Bruce is 33. Selina is 33. Dick is 20. Babs is 22, Jason is 18 but dead, but then comes back to life, and Tim Drake is introduced at 14. During this, Tim Drake becomes Robin and begins his training. Babs becomes Oracle, and various different Batman stories like Blind Justice happen during this time, which will eventually lead us into the next year of Batman's career, which is year 10. Right, year 10 is going to be a momentous year. First of all, Batman changes his costume back to the classic detective costume. Selina's wearing the purple costume now, and then Dick and Babs is just wearing civilian clothes, but Dick is wearing his basically Nightfall Dick Grayson costume, Nightwing costume. But in year 10, where Bruce is 33, Selina's not 33, 34, Selina 34, Dick is 21, Babs is 23, Jason is now alive again and is 19, and Tim Drake will be turning 15. Keyword is will be. He's 14 going to 15. Nightfall happens. So yeah, Jason's brought back to life during this time period. Nightfall happens. Batman's back gets broken. Now, Nightfall is still considered canon, but certain aspects of Nightfall are no longer canon, like Azrael being in Nightfall. That has been taken out. However, the majority of the Batman stuff is still considered during this time period. So yeah, let's take a short jump through, and we're going to recap, and then we're going to go into the next So the interesting thing about year 11 is that some Batman stories are taken out. Now, not many Batman stories are actually removed from canon. There's really 3, which is Long Halloween. But the other 2 are, and they're removed. Technically, they're supposed to take place during this time. No Man's Land is removed, so it's not canon. We know this because Cassandra Cain doesn't show up until Batman and Robin Forever. Yes. Eternal, not Forever. Wow. And then also the Bruce Wayne Murderer Fugitive series, which is removed because David Cain and Cassandra Cain played a major role in this, as well as Azrael showed up. It just doesn't fit. So, year 11, at this point, Bruce is 35, Selina's 35, Dick is 22, Babs is 24, Jason is now 20, Tim is 15 going on 16, I am 15 going on... No. I am 16, going on 17, whatever. Sound of Music, right? During this, a couple things happen. One, Tim Drake joins Young Justice. In addition to that, Batman Hush happens, which will eventually lead into Under the Hood, where Jason shows up as Red Hood. Now let's talk about a couple costumes. Hush is kind of debatable on what costume happened during this time. Many references are made recently to him having the Hush costume, right? The black bat symbol, the underwear, and all that stuff. But there are references to in Batman and Super Sons to a picture of him punching Superman in the New 52 costume, and Superman's wearing a different kind of a blend of, I think it's New 52 and Rebirth costume. That takes place during Hush when he punches Superman with the kryptonite ring. I don't know which costume he wears. I want to lean more towards the Hush costume because he hasn't gone back into the New 52 costume yet, but who knows. Dick is now wearing his more traditional Nightwing costume. Tim Drake, I did not talk about his costume beforehand, but every reference to Tim, New 52 onwards, is the fact that he wore his red and black 1 year later costume as his costume as Robin. But really, there's no substantial evidence that he didn't wear his classic costume either, so I'll leave that up to you to figure out. And Selina has officially adopted her modern costume that she's worn all the way up to her current series, which is the goggles and the straight black suit with the whip as the belt. Jason Todd, though, his Under the Hood costume has changed slightly. When references are made to Under the Hood in Rebirth in New 52, is basically just the Rebirth, the New 52 costume without the red bat symbol on it. So that's what happens during that year, and it's kind of a very squished year. We also know that that was year 11, going into year 12, we know that Infinite Crisis did not happen in current canon, or at least not the same, so there was no 1 year later. So year 12, that's when Damian gets first introduced to the Bat family. So Dick is 36, Selina is 36, not Dick, I keep on saying Dick. Bruce is 36, Selina is 36, Dick is 23, Babs is 25, Jason is 21, Tim is 16 going on 17, Damian is now 10 going on 11. So Damian's brought into the fold. Batman versus Black Glove happens, right? All the RIP stuff, which leads into Final Crisis. Bruce gets sent back in time and presumed dead, and Dick becomes Batman. Which will then lead us into, we might as well just wrap it up because we're getting towards the end. Year 13, Bruce is now 37, Selina is 37, Dick is 24, Babs is 26, Jason is 22, Tim is 18, 19, was 17 going on 18, and Damian is 11 going on 12. So a couple things happened during this time. One, Bruce comes back and he dons two costumes. He dons his Batman Inc. costume, which is basically kind of like the New 52 costume with just a more predominant cup. But the bat symbol on it, as well as he dons the New 52 version 2 costume, which is more of a streamlined Batman costume, a New 52 costume that doesn't have the armor on the inside, on the outside, but rather on the inside. It's more cloth based. Dick then goes from his Batman costume to his New 52 red Dick Grayson Nightwing costume. Tim Drake, who had transitioned from Red Robin, assumes two Red Robin costumes. First the hooded one, and then eventually the New 52 costume. Jason Todd is now rocking the Red Hood costume from the New 52. Catwoman is still in her standard Catwoman costume. And Damian Wayne's costume pretty much is easy to track because it doesn't change too much. Barbara Gordon also comes back as Batgirl. She gets surgery, gets a little chip put in her back, and she's back as Batgirl, and she starts wearing the New 52 version 1 costume, which is basically the purple cape with the gold and the black with the actual cowl. Now, during this year, this is where the majority of the New 52 stories happen. From Core of the Owls to Death of the Family to Batman Eternal, all the way leading up to when Batman disappears after, basically Endgame and leading into, Super Heavy, where Jim Gordon assumes the role of Batman. But we're not going to talk too much about that. But that eventually leads into the current year, right? We're at the end, year 13, where Batman is 38 years old. Selena's 38 years old. Dick is 25. Babs is 27. Jason is 23. Tim is 18-ish, going on 19. Damien is 13. Bruce proposes to Selena. Dick goes from super agent back into the Nightwing role. Damien creates his version of the Teen Titans. Damien creates his version of the Teen Titans. Dick creates his version of the Titans. Jason Todd reforms the Outlaws. Tim Drake reforms Young Justice. And Batman reforms the Outsiders. So a lot happens. Costume-wise, Batman adopts the Rebirth costume, which is basically New 52 costume, with the exception of a yellow outline on the bat symbol, a more kind of angular belt, purple on the inside of the cape, as well as the cape pins at the upper chest, as opposed to centered, right? So, I mean, if we have the Rebirth costume, this is really good figure for the Rebirth costume. We'll take the New 52 Batman costume. As you can see, figure-wise, they're not that much different, except for the outline, the belt, the inside of the cape, and how the cape drapes on here, as opposed to the New 52 costume. However, don't get used to that, because Batman then goes back to the Hush costume, because he wants to wear what he wore before he got proposed to Catwoman. Or before he proposed to Catwoman. And, yeah. Why would he go back to that? Well, in concept, the only difference between New 52 costume or Rebirth costume and the current costume is just aesthetics. They technically serve all the same thing, and I like to think Batman is just really stylish, and he likes to switch between his costumes. Catwoman gets her updated solo series costume, and Nightwing has his current costume. Tim reverts back to Robin. Currently he's a Robin, so there's two Robins right now, and then you also get Jason getting his Scorpion from Mortal Kombat Red Hood costume. So yeah, that's the basic gist of the Batman timeline. So yeah, I hope that helped you guys. It's something I had to get off my chest, something I had to work inside my head, because I really wanted to know what the ages of Batman were, as well as his allies. And I really wanted to kind of map out what costumes he wore, because right now DC's referencing every single costume under the sun that Batman's wore, but did he actually wear them? Who knows? It's really, at this point, it's whatever works in your head. But I hope you guys enjoy it. I want to know what your headcanon is, right? This again, headcanon. What would you guys do for ages for Batman? What would you guys do for timeline for Batman? With that said, this is Andrew saying peace out for now.